So we're going to set up for a pose that's going to work the area of the chest called the pectoralis muscles. So these are muscles that connect the side of your chest to your upper arm. They actually attach to your sternum and cross all the way over and connect to the upper arm bone. So what we'll need for this is a bolster and a blanket. And I have a 5-pound weight nearby. You might even do well to have like a 2, 3, 1-pound weight nearby. And this thing that we'll do with the weight at the end is optional. So if you get there and you feel like it's not appropriate for you, you do well just to skip it entirely. The other thing you need is a little bit of room on the sides of your space. So here's how we'll set this up. I've got a blanket going across my bolster. That's going to be for the back of my head. When I come down to this, I want the end of the bolster to go right across the bottom tips of my shoulder blades. And that's just about in line here with the bottom of the armhole of my shirt. So when I come back, part of my back is not on the bolster. You can see from my middle rib cage on down to my hips, I'm actually not on the bolster. And this is just to keep the chest a little uplifted. And again, we're using that blanket here to support the back of the head. Keep in mind that if you come into this and the back of your neck feels very crunchy, like you're lifting your chin towards the ceiling, you could absolutely, and I'll do this for myself here, fold the blanket up to come a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to give it a couple more layers of height. And that way, it's sort of like a slope from my head to my chest to my abdomen, kind of from the top of the bolster on the blanket all the way down to the floor. Okay, so from here, we're going to start with the arms a little bit away from the sides, almost like you were setting up into a Shavasana. And you're going to keep the entire forearm and the back of the hand on the floor. I'm doing this with both arms, but you won't be able to see the side of my body that's away from the camera, but I'll be doing the same thing on each side. And the first part of this for me is just to get here and to give it a couple of breaths. So in this moment, my chest is higher than both of my hands. So in that way, my arms are a little bit behind me. Of course, they're just on the floor, but because the chest is uplifted, we've created a little bit of a shoulder stretch on the front. Now, when we encounter that, what does it do to our breathing? So I'm going to give myself a moment here to notice if I can take a few easy, comfortable breaths. They're a little bit longer than usual. To keep it simple for the rest of the body, since we have a focal point of the pectoralis muscles, keep my knees bent and my feet on the floor. All right, and then from here, I'm going to move my arms out a little bit wider away from my sides. And again, I'm going to keep the entirety of the forearm and the back of each hand on the floor. So now, while my elbows are gently bent so they can touch down to the ground, my arms are a little bit wider from my sides, and I begin to perceive here a little bit more of my own restriction across the front of my chest. And same thing, to encounter this, I'm just going to give it a couple of inhales and exhales. So we'll do this position in one more place. So it's 3 total, closer, a bit farther out to the side. And then in a moment, we'll move even further along. And while you go through each of these 3 stages, I just want you to make sure that you can breathe pretty easily. That's why we're pausing as we set this up. I want you to make sure that you're not hardening your belly or your back. And then lastly, and maybe the most apparent, is when your arms go further back. So let's do this 3rd spot. Can you take your arms a little bit further away from your sides? You can see here that I'm keeping the entirety of my forearm, that's everything from the elbow to the back of my hand, on the floor. Now, when I come into this 3rd position, here's the other and final thing I'll have you think about. Do you lift your ribs higher? Like, do you have to accompany your arm stretching back with a pushing forward of your chest. And I wonder if you can, again, keep your belly and your back soft. So knees bent, feet stand on the floor. Hopefully that'll give the low back a little forgiveness. The arms have stretched to their third position that we're gonna use here. And I don't know about you, but I feel a stretch coming across the fronts of my shoulders and down into my upper arms. And I just want to make sure that as I'm in this more challenging position for the tightness of my chest and shoulders, that I'm not pushing my rib cage towards the ceiling. I can actually just hang down from my bolster. And we'll give it those last couple of breaths. So this is the first phase of it, just to put the arms in these 3 different places and to give each moment a few breaths. And I'd say that if this felt really good, that could be done 1 or 2 more times if you just wanted to take it really slow. I'm going to show you the next version of this because I think a few people will appreciate it. I'm just going to slide my arms all the way back down to their starting point. I'm not going to bother to squeeze them in right towards my sides. That's not going to help out with what we're doing. Palms are facing up. Everything from the elbows to the backs of my hands are on the floor. And then instead of just placing my arms in 3 different positions, I'm going to slide along the floor to those places. So at the top, I'm reaching my arms back. And then as I begin to draw my arms closer to my sides, I return to my starting point. Again, no need to squeeze in really tight, just arms loosely to the sides. And then I'll begin another cycle. So I'm going to talk for a moment about some things to pay attention to, but while I'm talking, I'm just going to continue to drag my arms along the floor. So an important point here is that you do not straighten your elbows and lift your arms up from the floor so that you're just dragging your knuckles or the backs of your hands. I really want you to feel that you're sweeping your forearms along the floor. So that's one important point. The arms have to stay in contact with the floor. Otherwise, I think you'll end up just tightening the very thing we're trying to get to move and lengthen and mobilize. The next point I want to make is that we're all so different on the 2 sides of our bodies, and we're just different from each other, yeah? So as you go through this, you might say to yourself, you know, I have a real restriction on one side, and I'm just going to focus on that one side a couple of times. So if you know you have a side that's not so troubled in this, maybe it just takes a pause as the other one gets all your focus for, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 cycles. And the last thing I want you to notice, so 1, the arms stay down. 2, you can be a little bit asymmetrical if you want to work that way. And then lastly, I want you to make sure that you're not using your neck to take those arms along the floor to that higher up position. That as you go through this, your neck is made to be really easy. And if that's not so, pause the next time your arms are closer to your sides and just roll from one to one side. And when you're lighter on that other side, draw that shoulder blade down and replicate that on side 2. So I'm tipping over towards my left. My right shoulder is free for a moment, so I'm just going to slide it down. And then I'm just going to center myself one more time to my back. And that way I can make sure as I next do the coming few cycles of this, that again, I'm not drawing my shoulders towards my neck. Okay. So we've done a few. The first version was to hold your arm in 3 different places along the floor. The second version has more continuous motion to it. I still would want you to keep your ribs down. So if your arms reach really far back, but your ribs go to the ceiling, try to soften your belly, your back. Okay. And the last thing I want to show you is the version where you may or may not choose to pick up a little bit of weight. I just got to reach here for my 5-pounder. And again, 5 pounds isn't anything special. It's just the weight that I have around. So I would be interested to hear if anybody felt like a 1 pound weight, like which even could be a cork yoga block, could be just as useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my weight back close to the place where my arm is up stretching. And just to keep myself on camera a little bit, I better scooch around. Okay. And I'm just going to do this with the one side at a time. So no need to do the 2 at once. So I've got my weight right here, and I'm just going to slip my hand underneath it. Again, this could be a yoga block that you're holding on to one side of it. It could even be like those metal water bottles that a lot of folks have. If you filled one up with water, it probably weighs a pound or so. What I'm going to do from here is keep my elbow on the floor and bend that elbow to raise the weight. Now, I'm not going to bother to do the full cycle where I drop the weight to my chest. I just want to come up, you know, almost to the point where my elbow is straight. And I'm going to press my elbow to the ground, making sure it's not lifting up. And then I'm going to lower that back down. I'm going to do 4 more of these, so 5 total. So an elbow bend, but I'm pressing my elbow into the floor. And then I'm releasing my hand, my weight back down. Let's do 3 more. So on this next 3, I'm going to make sure that my neck isn't getting scrunched, that I'm not hiking my rib cage towards the ceiling. And then I keep my elbow pushing down as though I wanted to leave a little hollow or divot in my yoga mat with that elbow pressure. I think this is my last one. I lost count, as I always do. All right, and then I'm going to do this on my second side, so follow me for that guidance and timing if you want it. I'm going to have to move a little bit to keep some room here in our little yoga nook at home. So I'm passing this weight over to my other arm, the one that's not as easily seen on screen, but I have my arm out towards its highest position that I've been doing. I've caught the weight in my hand, and I'm just going to take that elbow into a partial bend, and then I'm going to release my hand and weight back down towards the floor for about 5 of these. Now, as you go through this, again, make sure that the elbow stays on the ground. I know I can't show you that from the side, but as you go up and down with this, don't lift your elbow up to lift your whole arm up. You're just bending that elbow. That's going to ask your bicep to do some work. While it has lengthened, it's going to keep that stretch going across the chest to the shoulder, across the deltoid, across the pectoralis. I think I've got 1 more to do. Bending that elbow, and then I'm going to release the weight down. All right, so that's 3 things to do with this setup. The first one, just holding your arms in 3 different places and taking some breath. That second one was sweeping the arms up and down. And the third one, we included a little loading, a little weight bearing on that. So those are 3 great things to use the arm in this extended position so that you're contracting some of those muscles that tend to hold our shoulders very far forward. Here we're trying to get them to be strong while our arms are back. So a really good sequence there for keeping the pec chest strong. All right, hope you liked it.